For those unaware, Lameduke is a prototype version of Duke Nukem 3D that I've covered here before on the channel. Last time I took a look at the enemies and weapons featured in the game, and today I'm back with a new video looking at some of the levels. Specifically, I'll be looking at the levels from the first chapter of the game. We'll get to see some very early level design, most of which would end up being completely scrapped. We'll also have a look at some of the pickups that can be found throughout the levels, and see what else would change before Duke 3D. Before we begin though, I'd like to address a few things from my first video. In my original video when looking at the enemies, I completely missed out the bat. It doesn't do much, but here it is anyway. As you can see, it has primitive AI, where it will charge you when you get too close. Also, the Protozoid Slimer will in fact devour troopers. It's different to how it absorbs them in the final game. Here, as you can see, it absorbs the enemy and leaves nothing but gibs. I also failed to mention that the music used in Lameduke is Going Down the Fast Way from Apogee's Rise of the Triad, composed by Lee Jackson. There are also some borrowed graphics used from this game, which you'll see later in the video. There are 4 episodes in Lameduke: Mrr Caliber, Mission Cockroach, Suckhole, and Hard Landing. Today we'll be concentrating on the first episode, Mrr Caliber. I'm not sure what this means even after trying to look it up. It's possibly a military acronym. If you have any idea, please let me know in the comments. I'll be releasing more videos similar to this in the future, so if you enjoy this content, please feel free to like and subscribe. Anyway, with all that said, let's jump in and take a look at Lameduke Episode 1. The first level starts you off inside a small room with a spaceship that Duke has presumably used to get here. I'll try and get a good look at it for you. And over to the right is a corridor leading to space, where, if we look outside, there are spaceships flying around on a set path. They look a bit different to the one in the hangar. There are no obvious markings on any spaceship that I can see, for example, Earth Defense Forces like we see in the final. I'm assuming these are enemy ships. Opposite to your starting position in the first room is a vent that you can jump in, but the ability to break it open doesn't exist yet. If we follow the elevator up, we find an unused item in the form of a bubble. It was likely a shield or armor of some kind, but it doesn't seem to do anything here. The next room over is a large hangar with our first enemies in. It also has our first instance of the unused trash cans and barrels. The barrels will fire up to the ceiling when shot at, and the trash cans will split in half, often exposing an enemy or ammunition inside. There's also a restroom in here with smashed mirrors, presumably so they didn't have to show your reflection. There are several toilets that use a different design to the ones in the final, and what looks like they might be showers. Here we also see the first instance of the cola pickup. The Coca-Cola pickups are a reference to the soda power-ups from the previous games. These would be replaced by the small medkit in the final game, although they still retain the name Cola in the files. Interestingly, you can shoot and destroy the Coke cans, rendering them useless. This side room has a cool feature where shooting the windows will make the walls come down. The next large room has some exploding canisters near the command center that when blown up will damage the wall, allowing you to jump inside. Interestingly, this canister looks as though it survived until the final version, as we can see here in this comparison. To either side of this room are 2 hangars, which you can open, but there's nothing much to see besides some pistol ammo. And this corridor in the command center leads to the end of the level. Here we have a prototype end-level screen that displays a map, similar to the one featured in Doom. The idea here is that it will show you where you've been, and where the next level takes place. It also displays some stats, but it's not working yet. Level 2 starts off in an underground subway station, with a train to our right. It's cool to see that they already had working trains, even in this early build. If we alight from the train here, we can find a room with prototype Protozoid Slimers. If you'd like to see the enemies in a bit more detail, please feel free to check out my previous video, the link will be in the description. There's also a unique texture of a woman displayed on this monitor. No idea who she is. This area will loop around back to the train. Taking the train again will lead us to a larger room full of trooper enemies. Here we can also see the battery ammo for the plasma rifle and the taser. Taking this side elevator, we will eventually find the armory. The armory has a plasma rifle on its wall texture, which I thought was pretty cool. There are lots of ammo pickups in here, as well as some cola to replenish your health. Not that you really need it in this build, as Duke is unable to take damage. There are also some drones flying around, but they're nothing to worry about. Shooting this canister will lead us back into the armory. If we go back to the main room, there is a second train that leads us to a small room with a trooper and some pickups. Going through this door here reveals a stairwell leading down to a narrow corridor with some more drones. The end of the level is just behind them. Another thing worth mentioning is how Duke doesn't smash the nuclear symbol to end the level yet. We seem to finish levels by entering into a small red room. Level 3 starts in a room with some pillars in the middle. If we explore ahead, we find some elevators that take us to a higher platform, with a long corridor that leads to more rooms either side. If we go down the dark end of the corridor, we find the door that leads to the end of the level, but it's locked at the moment. We can open this door though, and find an interesting room with 3 red lights and some giant monitors. I'm only speculating here, but these things may have been where enemies would teleport into the room, but here they do nothing. There is some cola placed on them though, and in the middle of the room we find a switch that doesn't seem to do anything. It's not all bad though, as there's a plasma rifle with some ammo. Going back to the corridor and down the other side, we come to a similar junction. There's what seems like blood or rust on the floor textures. I also like this lighting. Creepy. Going through this door we come into a room with lots of smashable glass in. I find the level design here to be quite simple, but I still somehow end up getting lost. Going around to the left takes us up onto the lookout where there's some enemies and a button we can press. If we take a right, we find an elevator that takes us down to 2 different floors. There's nothing much going on in the basement. But on this floor, we find perhaps the most interesting area in the level. Here, the walls are adorned with hooks, and if we investigate further, we find some red glass that we're unable to smash. Peering in, we can see what look like operating tables. Let's go and take a closer look. Well, obviously some messed up stuff has been happening in here. There's blood all over the tables, bloody hooks on the walls, and even some body parts hanging up. Just what were they doing to these people? I find it interesting to wonder what it may have meant to the story of the game. Anyway, we press this switch and make our way back through the level to the previously locked door. Here we find a room with a reactor in the middle. The reactor cannot be damaged. If we go through this door and make our way downstairs, there is a corridor leading to the end of the level. Level 4 is a short level that starts us off in a room with some prototype Octobrain enemies, known as jellyfish at this time in development. There's a big trapdoor leading to space on the floor, and when opened, it will draw in all the nearby enemies, although it's unfinished and doesn't actually fully pull them out. If you look closely, you can see that it also pulls in the security camera from the ceiling. I wonder if this was intentional. From this first room you can go up, which leads to nowhere, or down, which will progress you through the level. Honestly, this level is full of mostly empty, non-essential side rooms with not much to see other than some enemies, and since I've already looked into the enemies in a previous video, I've decided to skip them. Going down this way, you eventually come into a room with some turrets in. Shooting the door behind this turret will semi-open the door, allowing us to crawl inside. Here we have a massive room with another reactor in the middle. The revolving glass can be destroyed, and inside we find a switch that lowers the floor. There's no end of level trigger here, so we're free to explore or just move on to the next level. Level 5 is another short level, but that's not to say it doesn't have anything interesting to see. This level starts off with a glitchy escalator. It functions in a way, as it will send you down if you stand on them. But as you can see, the walls here look pretty bad. It messes with my head. There are some turnstiles here that will open when you press action on them. They open and close way too quickly though. It's easier to just walk over them. Anyway, moving through the room we'll see our first feminoid, and we'll notice that we're in another subway system. We could run across these tracks and finish the level very quickly, but there's more for us to see, so let's take the train. Now that Duke has presumably left the space station, we find that the train's design is more like what you might expect to see on Earth. This section specifically is heavily rumoured to have inspired the final game's Rapid Transit level. As you can see here, it does look quite similar if we compare the levels. After using the first train, we find a restroom with a guy passed out in the back. It looks as though he's been drinking. Moving on, we eventually find this area with a switch and some sort of water feature. Going down the hole in the water leads to some cola pickups and eventually loops back round. Going up will take us to a teleporter that warps us back to the start of the level. And if we walk over the train tracks and go behind this wall, we'll see another set of weird glitchy escalators. I like how they aren't the same length. Making our way into the next room, we're ambushed by some captains and drones. We can use the pipe bombs we just picked up to sort them out. Just behind them, beyond the turnstiles, is a door that leads to the end of the level. Level 6 is perhaps the most interesting level in all of Lameduke, where some of the most famous Duke levels would be derived from, such as Hollywood Holocaust and Red Light District. As soon as you start the level, you drop down and are quickly approached by a horde of troopers. This bar here is assumed to be the inspiration for Red Light District. As we make our way into the bar area, we're attacked by troopers on the left. Once we've dealt with them, we can explore the bar area and we'll find an NPC swigging beer. You're unable to damage the NPC, and he will just sit there getting drunk. Going further into the bar, there's a very small toilet with not much to see. But beyond here is the dance floor, with some cool red and blue lighting that even affects your weapons. There's a secret area towards the back which houses another NPC behind a desk, and on the walls we see the same texture from the armory back in level 2. Just beyond the bar, further down the street, we can see the cinema which would inspire the one from the final game's Hollywood Holocaust. Unfortunately, the cinema cannot be entered, but on display outside are movie posters for the real-life Schwarzenegger movie, True Lies. And a poster with a vampire-like creature on it, with some alien text underneath. This texture would also survive until the final game, but it would lose the alien text and instead be used as a movie poster. Interestingly, the boarded up doors we see here will remain until the final version. We can also see that both versions of the building share a similar shape. There's a building near the spawn point surrounded with explosives that, when shot, will collapse the building. Also, on top of some of the buildings around here are the flames used from Rise of the Triad. There's also a motel found in this level, which mostly consists of empty, unfurnished rooms. A later pre-release screenshot exists of this area showing more work had been done on the level before they decided to scrap it. A strip club also exists on this map. Here we find another bar area, some empty cages for dancers or a DJ, and a strip pole on the stage in the middle of the room. There's a much bigger toilet here compared to the other bar, and hidden away at the back is a secret exit behind the mirror leading back to the street. There are also several waterways throughout the map, allowing Duke to traverse underground. There are some jellyfish enemies hiding down here, and eventually we find a section of the level only accessible through swimming. There's not much to see here, but I thought I'd show it off anyway. There's a building based on the US Bank. It's assumed that this is where the level was supposed to finish, as it's where the next level takes place. But you're unable to open the door at this point. Level 7 is basically about scaling the building using the awkward elevator controls, all while collecting ammo for the inevitable boss battle on top. Each floor consists of more and more enemies to fight and more ammo to collect. There's really not much to see though. One interesting thing to mention is there's a different music track when you're in the elevator. This is the only instance of the music changing that I've noticed so far. Here's a short clip. Wasn't that nice? Anyway, we also see the introduction of the unfinished Mandroid enemy. There's nothing we haven't already seen on these floors, so let's make our way up to the top. Standing on this warp will take us to the final level of this chapter, level 8. Once you reach the top, you're in the first boss battle. You're faced with several drones and Mandroids, and in the sky is a ship that cannot attack or take damage. On the back of here we find a working CCTV monitor. If we look around the level we can see the cameras are actually floating out in the distance. Also, the skybox is glitched here. It looks pretty crazy. While I've enjoyed playing this game, I think the overall look in this first episode is pretty drab if I'm being honest. It's very grey and dull for the most part, and can make navigating the levels quite difficult. This is one aspect that they really nailed with the final game. Aesthetically, they're worlds apart. Overall though, I have to say I really like what's here in this prototype. I find it fascinating just how different it is from Duke 3D. Thank God the guys at 3D Realms knew that this wasn't going to cut it if they were going to compete with games like Doom and Quake. But I shouldn't judge it too harshly. It's called Lameduke for a reason. They knew what they were doing. But that's it for the first episode of Lameduke. I hope you'll agree there's some cool stuff to see here. There are several more Lameduke episodes to check out, so please let me know if you'd like to see more in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
What are you waiting for? Christmas?